It was the kind of Monday morning that hung heavy in the air. Rain tapped softly against the tall windows of the Whitmore estate, a 15,000-square-foot mansion nestled in the hills of Marin County. Inside, silence echoed through the gleaming marble halls like a secret waiting to be discovered. Billionaire Nathaniel Whitmore sat at the head of his oak breakfast table, barely glancing at the spread before him. Freshly baked croissants, eggs Benedict, imported strawberries, everything luxury could offer. Yet he sipped his black coffee with an air of detachment. Money had never been his problem. Meaning had. Nathaniel had built tech empires before he could legally rent a car. He'd graced Forbes lists, bought jets on whims, and hosted galas for causes he barely understood. But lately, it all felt hollow. Even as staff moved silently around him, tending to the house's needs, he felt like a ghost in his own castle. That's when he noticed her. The new maid. Small-framed, no more than 25, with raven black hair tied in a messy bun. Her uniform was clean but faded at the cuffs, and her sneakers were clearly secondhand. But what truly caught Nathaniel's attention wasn't her appearance. It was her eyes. There was something in them. Fatigue, yes, but also a fierce dignity. Like she was fighting a war no one could see. She moved with care, polishing vases, fluffing pillows, aligning picture frames with meticulous attention. But there was no idle chatter, no desire to be noticed. She was a shadow, perfectly silent. And yet, every once in a while, she would steal a glance toward the large French doors that led outside, her gaze lingering for a beat too long. Curiosity bloomed in Nathaniel's chest. Who was she? He waited until she stepped outside during her lunch break. It was a cold day. Most staff stayed in the kitchen or staff lounge. But she went behind the estate, toward the overgrown path that led down the hill. She had no idea she was being followed. Nathaniel moved quietly, staying far enough to remain unseen, but close enough to observe. The path was steep, muddy, and tangled with branches. She held up her skirt to avoid dragging it through the thorns, and Nathaniel couldn't help but wonder why she'd risk the terrain on a lunch break. Then he saw it. A small clearing opened to a dirt patch, half sheltered by old trees. There a boy, perhaps 6 years old, waited. Dressed in a thin hoodie and mismatched shoes, he lit up when he saw her. She smiled at him in a way Nathaniel hadn't seen all morning. She knelt down, pulled out a sandwich wrapped in tinfoil, and handed it to the child. Then she took out a second one and ate alongside him. They didn't speak much, just sat close, shared a laugh, and looked at something on a crumpled piece of paper, a drawing, perhaps. When it started to drizzle again, she removed her jacket and wrapped it around the child. Then she kissed his forehead, whispered something in his ear, and walked back up the hill alone, shoulders straight. Nathaniel stood frozen. Back at the house, he waited for her return. She re-entered through the back entrance, wiping mud from her shoes before returning to the same quiet, invisible presence she had earlier, as if the scene in the clearing had never happened. That night, Nathaniel couldn't sleep. He walked past the library, past the gym he never used, into the room where his parents' portraits still hung. They had raised him to work hard, build wealth, donate to charity. But had they ever taught him how to really see someone? The next morning, he asked Mrs. Lambert, his housekeeper of 20 years, about the maid. "That's Elena," she said. "Started 2 months ago. Good girl. Quiet. Keeps to herself. Does she have a son?" Mrs. Lambert paused, surprised. "I believe so. She never speaks of him unless necessary. Single mother, I think. Works here mornings, then at the diner on Brookside Avenue in the evenings. Tough life." He nodded, saying nothing. But something in him shifted. The next week, he watched her closely, but not intrusively. He noticed how she always finished early, how she avoided waste, saving half her lunch to take home. He noticed how she flinched when others raised their voices, how she always checked her phone at exactly 3 p.m., probably to see if her son had made it back to the shelter from school. One afternoon, as she was heading out early, Nathaniel made a quiet decision. He followed her again. This time, not through the woods, but into the city. She took 2 buses, changed at a dusty terminal, and walked several blocks to a worn-out building labeled Hopeway Women's Shelter. She entered, greeted the receptionist with a tired smile, and disappeared inside. Nathaniel stood across the street, heart thudding. So that's where she lived. Back home, the mansion felt colder than usual. The crystal chandeliers, the grand staircase, the marble counters, everything screamed wealth. But it all felt useless when he knew someone was out there raising a child with nothing, yet with more strength and love than he had ever known. He walked to the kitchen, grabbed 2 sandwiches from the chef's tray, and left them by the window. The next morning, they were gone. No one said anything. But when he checked the maid's locker, there was a hand-drawn thank you note tucked into the side, with a crayon heart signed Tommy. The boy's name was Tommy. Nathaniel sat in his office that night, scrolling through business contracts and tech proposals, but his mind kept drifting back to the drawing. He thought of his fortune, his philanthropy awards, his faceless donations. None of it had ever felt this personal. He was a billionaire. But she, Elena, was surviving with more grace, strength, and silent courage than any award winner he'd ever met. That night, he wrote a new will. But it wasn't enough. He wanted to do more. And for the first time in years, it wasn't to be seen. It was to see someone else. The next morning, he stood at the staff entrance as Elena arrived. She blinked, startled to see him. "Mr. Whitmore?" she asked, voice cautious. "I wanted to thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For teaching me what it means to be human again." She looked confused, then offered the smallest, warmest smile he'd ever seen. He smiled back. "Would you join me for coffee?" She hesitated, glancing at the mop bucket in her hand. He took it gently and set it down. "You've cleaned enough. Let me serve you this time." Elena sat awkwardly on the edge of the chair in the sunlit atrium. Her fingers gripped the teacup like it might disappear at any moment. It wasn't that she hadn't held fine china before. She had, daily. Just never on this side of the table. Nathaniel poured her another cup. No butler, no staff. Just him. No airs, no suits. He wore jeans, a simple sweater. He looked like any man, but Elena knew better. "You followed me," she said quietly after a moment of silence. He didn't deny it. "Yes." "Why?" Nathaniel sighed. "Because I saw someone who reminded me of everything I forgot to be thankful for." Elena's eyes dropped. She was used to being unseen. "Not like this." "You should have told me," she whispered. "I thought I was helping," he replied. "You were. But not all help feels safe when you come from places like mine." That hit him harder than he expected. She wasn't ungrateful. She was guarded, because survival required it. "I want to offer you and Tommy a better place to live," he said after a pause. "A home. An apartment. Not a favor, but a new start." Elena looked up, eyes wide with emotion. "Why would you do that for me?" "Because no one should have to choose between feeding their child and getting some rest. Because I've spent my life giving money, but never giving meaning. And because I believe in you." She bit her lip, fighting the tears. That weekend, Nathaniel arranged a furnished apartment near Tommy's school. He hired a tutor for evenings. Quietly, he paid off Elena's hospital debt from her husband's accident, the one that had driven her to the brink. She never asked how he knew. She simply cried when the letter came in the mail. But Nathaniel didn't stop there. He visited the shelter anonymously, funding repairs, food programs, and childcare. He never once put his name on a plaque. And one day, he visited Tommy's school with a permission slip in hand. "I'd like to mentor your class for a month," he told the teacher. "Tech skills, creative thinking, confidence." The teacher blinked. "You're the Nathaniel Whitmore?" He smiled. "Just Mr. Nate here." As weeks passed, Elena grew in confidence. She started taking night courses in finance, and Nathaniel offered her a new position, not as a maid, but as the personal assistant to the charitable foundation he created in her name, the Elena Hope Initiative. One crisp autumn afternoon, Tommy ran down the steps of their apartment building with a drawing in hand. It showed a stick-figure man with glasses, a smiling woman, and a little boy in between them. "You're my superhero," Tommy told Nathaniel. "But Mommy is the real boss." Nathaniel laughed, his eyes warm. "She always will be." Years later, at the opening ceremony of a community center for single parents, Elena stood behind the podium in a navy blue suit. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled, but she ignored all of them. She looked into the crowd at Nathaniel. "Once upon a time," she said, voice steady, "I cleaned his floors while trying to keep my child from starving. Today, he stands beside me, not as a savior, but as someone who believed in my worth when I had forgotten it myself. He followed me once. What he saw changed his life. And what he gave me changed mine." The applause thundered. But Nathaniel didn't stand. He simply smiled. Because for the first time in his life, he didn't need to be the richest man in the room. He just needed to be present. And that was enough.